Pledge of the Allegiance. Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to Southampton's 2015 Candidate Forum. Of course, the purpose of tonight's forum is to provide an opportunity for Southampton voters like yourselves to learn more about the candidates running for contested offices, and for candidates to share their experiences and qualifications, their vision for the board and commission, and the commitment they will bring to each office. I would like to thank all of you for agreeing to participate in tonight's affair, as well as thank all the volunteers in elected offices for their time and commitment to make Southampton a great town. I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight's forum, Ray Drunowski. Hi, Ray. Ray is a native of the Pioneer Valley and is a union representative for healthcare workers. He served as a member of the Governor's Non-Discrimination, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity Advisory Council, the Easthampton Housing Partnership Committee, and the Easthampton Fair Housing Committee. Again, thank you, Ray, for joining us tonight. The forum is being broadcasted on Channel 191 through ECAT. Thank you very much, and I'll turn tonight's forum over to Ray.
Thank you very much, Janet. If I could just remind everyone in the audience, if you wouldn't mind silencing your electronic devices, that would be splendid. Tonight's forum will begin with a 3-minute introduction by each candidate, where they will share their experiences and qualifications for the position, their vision for the board or commission for which they wish to serve, and the commitment they will bring to each office. The timekeeper, Art, will tap the gavel once at 30 seconds, and he will tap the gavel twice when their time is up. 3 questions have been given to each candidate prior to this evening's forum, and they will be given 2 minutes to respond to each of the questions they have received. During the 3 minutes of introduction this evening, delivered by the candidates, those of you here in the audience, the voters, will have a chance to write down your questions for each candidate. Volunteers will collect your questions following the introductions by each group. Members of the organizing committee will select the most frequently asked questions from the voters in attendance to be asked of the candidates by myself this evening. We'll begin this evening with the Board of Health candidates, who are Jeffrey Dugas and Charlie Konecki. The voters here, if you are interested in submitting a question to the Board of Health candidates, if you would raise your hand, the volunteers will pass you an index card. So if we would begin with Jeff Dugas and his introduction for the Board of Health.
I'd like to start off by thanking Janet, thanking Ray for putting this together tonight and giving us the opportunity to speak to the public. My name is Jeff Dugas, Jeffrey Dugas, call me Jeff. I grew up in Southampton. I went to Larrabee School. I continued on to Norris School. I continued on to Hampshire Regional High School. I was involved in Southampton youth athletics right up to high school and played athletics at Hampshire Regional, soccer and basketball there. After graduating from Hampshire Regional, I continued on to Bryant University in Rhode Island. I graduated with a business administration degree, bachelor's degree, and decided to move back to Southampton after graduating from Bryant. Came back to my roots. I like it here. I like the town. Just wanted to come back home. After living here for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to invest in my future, and I actually moved out of town. I bought a piece of property in Huntington, built a house there, lived there for a couple of years, and got married. After getting married, we decided we wanted to come back to Southampton, so we sold our house in Huntington, bought a piece of property on Rattle Hill Road, and that's where I currently live now with the house that my wife and I built there. Just to elaborate on my personal information, I just had a baby boy about 6 months ago. Some of you may have seen pictures on Facebook. I think he's probably the cutest little kid there is. As far as my professional work goes, I work for a local construction company based out of Southampton. We specialize in site work construction, sewer, water, drain installations, basic infrastructure for small, medium, and large projects. I'm familiar with the Title V septic system regulations for soil absorption systems, and basically several different types of Title V and septic systems that are installed in the communities around us. I help manage between 30 and 35 employees at work every day, deal with a lot of different attitudes, deal with a lot of personalities, get a lot of questions thrown at me that are sometimes challenging, but try to answer them the best that I can. That's intimidating. To wrap it up quickly, I've dealt with a lot of different boards of health and a lot of surrounding communities. I have experience with how each board of health operates, what their requirements are, what their regulations are, and I feel like I have experience in that area that might help our board of health in Southampton run more efficiently.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charlie, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm Charlie Konecki. I lived in town my whole life. I used to work in the Pittsfield Health Department, and I traveled there for 2+ years, and after that I moved on to working in West Springfield Health Department. And I've been in the public health field for 8+ years. I do mainly code enforcement for the town of West Springfield right now, known as the city, and that's strictly housing code inspections. That's basically it.
Great, you aren't required to fulfill all the minutes you were allotted, so that's good. Thank you very much, Charlie. So we'll move to the questions that each candidate was given before. Yes.
We just collect the question and
I'm sorry.
None? For Board of Health? Okay, thanks, Ray.
Sure. So the questions they were given in advance for the Board of Health, will start with Jeff. Could the health agent work on a per request basis? In other words, get paid for BOH request by a fee basis, like electrical and plumbing inspectors, thus saving the town money for not having to supply benefits?
My short and quick answer is no. I believe that the electrical and plumbing inspector here in town are on an as-needed basis. I think the health agent in town needs to be much more proactive than as needed. My outlook on this a few years ago might have been different, but the more I read, the more I learn, the more I look at it, I think it's something that is needed in town. The health agent is here, or would be here, to protect the public, to protect the public's health, and make sure that our community is safe. The health agent's not only here for inspections. The realm of their information and their area of expertise is so massive that there's too much for a as-needed health agent. They have to stay up to date on changing regulations. They have to stay up to date on disease prevention. They have to protect our drinking supply. We live on the Barnes Aquifer. We have to protect our groundwater, make sure that's not contaminated. There's consumer complaints that come in, complaints from the public, that a health agent may have to go to a site and visit and see what the problem is or what the complaints are. There's summer camps that are held in town that require certain permits. We operate a landfill here, transfer station, that also might require some attention. So to wrap up again, after my 2.5 minutes, my answer is no. I think not having a health agent here opens the town for much liability that otherwise could be covered.
Thank you. So the same question for you, Charlie. Could the health agent work on a per-request basis, and meaning get paid for BOH request by a fee basis, like electrical and plumbing inspectors, thus saving the town money for not having to supply benefits?
I actually agree. I actually say no as well, simply because the responsibility of the health agent, there's quite a lot of things they're responsible for: septic, food inspections, disease surveillance, housing complaints. But I can't imagine there being many housing complaints in town. Things of that nature. It just doesn't. From Southampton's point of view, I just think that having a full-time agent's a good idea and should stay full-time. That's my belief.
Great, thank you. The second question will start with Charlie as we're rotating back and forth between the candidates. Can you explain the scope of work for which the Board of Health is responsible? Given the very tight town budget, how do you see the Board of Health meeting its obligations?
The scope that they're responsible for, well, the food establishments, making sure they're permitted every year, making sure they're inspected twice a year, making sure septic systems are installed properly, making sure perk tests are performed, witnessing and whatnot, investigating any kind of complaints, whatnot that come up, things of that nature.
Great, thanks. Another same question for you, Jeff. Can you explain the scope of work for which the Board of Health is responsible? And given the very tight town budget, how do you see the Board of Health meeting its obligations?
I agree with the scope that Charlie's outlined so far. There are many other aspects that the Board of Health has to take into consideration. Like I mentioned before, we need to make sure our drinking supply is safe, private and public. Aquifer protection. There's document and reporting that needs to take place. Trends happen. We see West Nile, we've seen SARS, we've seen whooping cough, measles. All that needs to be documented. It may not happen in our town, but it can. And if it does, it needs to be reported to the authorities and make sure that's documented and try to figure out why it happened here. Another thing I think that's really important is we have pockets of the population that are considered high risk. For me, it's the children and the elderly. We have to monitor the establishments that our children attend, schools, playgrounds, camps, and we also have to monitor the elderly in town. If there's certain elders in town that may be sick or may not be as mobile as they used to be, we need to notify utility companies that, hey, you can't shut their water off, you can't shut their gas off, their power off. These people need it to survive. So those are some of the things that the Board of Health would be responsible for. As far as the budget in town, no department here has the money that they can operate on. We're not in an ideal situation, but we've got to be creative. We've got to think of ways to make the money work. We have to treat it like it's our dollar. We have to allocate our money to the best possible option that money will buy. So basically, it comes down to being creative and being intelligent with our dollars.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Well, again, Jeff, we'll start with you on the last question for the Board of Health. Will you uphold health codes regarding septic and food inspections without offering variances?
Yes and no. It's kind of a loaded question. I feel like there's a lot of variables there that come into play, and there's a lot of information that you have to bring in. You have to recognize that information. You have to recognize dangers. And you really have to take a look at what the best outcome and what the best option might be. It's very fact specific. I'm not going to say that I will not grant a variance. I think there's going to be circumstances that arise that a variance is acceptable or needed even at times. So without having a a very specific circumstance, I can't say yes or no to the question, but I will say that I will not take the stance where I'm going to say I will not grant a variance. If the facts deem it, I will grant a variance.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And Charlie, for you, will you uphold health codes regarding septic and food inspections without offering variances?
Depends on what the variance is for. I mean, it really depends on what the variance is for. I mean, I'm not going to offer a variance if I feel that it's health and safety-wise, safety is at risk. But if it's something that's simple, then I'll look at it. But it depends on the consensus of the Board of Health itself, not just one board member, but what the Board of Health as a whole believes. So it's yes and no, like Jeff.
Great, thank you very much. So that ends the prepared questions that each of the candidates received prior to this evening. And we have 2 questions submitted by the audience that we will now ask each of the candidates to answer. And we'll start again with Charlie. Do you support prohibiting smoking from outdoor recreation spaces?
Where would it be located? By a school?
It doesn't say, it just says outdoor.
Outdoor. If it's by a school and whatnot, I would say they shouldn't have it. But if in a common area of a home, if it's a housing unit, if it's a shared area, I'd say no because it's not in an area. But if it's in someone's confined house or whatnot, it's in their home. It doesn't matter to me. So I'd probably say no if it's in a shared area.
Okay. And Jeff, for you, do you support prohibiting smoking from outdoor recreation spaces?
I guess it depends on what the definition of an outdoor recreation space is. To me, I would consider that an area where people gather, a school, a playground, a soccer field, an outdoor restaurant. I would support prohibiting smoking in those areas. I don't think you can consider a sidewalk on Pomeroy Meadow Road a recreational area. So I think if somebody's walking down the sidewalk and they want to smoke a cigarette, that's their right. They can do that. You can't take away people's rights. But anywhere where people gather, I think it would be smart for the public's health to prohibit smoking in those areas.
Great, thanks very much. And the second question submitted by the audience, we'll start with you, Jeff. Does the Board of Health require a full-time health agent, and would you consider sharing the position with another town?
I don't believe the Board of Health requires it. I think there's certain regulations that the DEP and the state of Massachusetts require the Board of Health to meet. Like we talked about in some of our questions, there's certain things that need to be recorded, documented, and although I don't think that a health agent is required by the state of Massachusetts, I think it would be supported by the state of Massachusetts. I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you. And Charlie, does the Board of Health require a full-time health agent, and would you consider sharing the position with another town?
If I would entertain the idea of sharing it with another town, if what the consensus is with the Board of Health, if we meet, I mean, that's something I'd probably look at. But it really depends on what the quantity of work, how much work there is in town. Because I really don't know. I mean, I work in West Springfield, I have 28,000 people. So the population there and the population here, different. Even when I was in Pittsfield, it was 48,000, 50,000 people. And again, population is different. So it really depends on what's here for the population. So I would entertain the idea of maybe possibly sharing an agent, maybe to save money, but right now I think it should stay full-time until we figure out what needs to be done.
Great, thank you very much. And so that concludes all the questions we have for each of the candidates this evening. We will now wrap up with a 1-minute wrap up each candidate, and we will begin that with Charlie.
1 minute. Let's see. Well, I don't know really what to say other than the fact that I'm interested to be on the Board of Health to help the town. That's all I want to do is just help the town. I work with other I work in different communities, so being here and actually working in being here to help the town that I live in sounds beneficial for me. So that's about it.
Thanks very much. And Jeff?
Not to go back to the questions, but I kind of overlooked the last question there. I kind of agree with Charlie. I would entertain the idea of a regionalized Board of Health or a health agent, but I think there's, once again, many factors to bring into thought to make that decision, which I'm not fully aware of at this time. But to close, I am running for the Board of Health. I would appreciate your vote. I may not know everything about the Board of Health, but I know how to find the answers. I know how to make an intelligent decision and hopefully do the very best that I can for the town. So I'd appreciate your vote on May 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our Board of Health portion. Now we'll move to the school committee. Thank you both to Jeff and Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Good luck.
My own, thank you. Walden, miss. Thank you. We'll share.
So we'll begin the school committee portion of the forum this evening. And again, if you would raise your hand if you have a question for a member of any of the candidates for school committee, someone from a volunteer will hand an index card out so you can write those questions down. Again, we'll do this in the same way with a 3-minute introduction. We'll then collect the audience questions. And then each candidate has received 3 questions in advance that they will answer. And then we will ask 2 or 3 more questions from the audience, and then they will have a 1-minute wrap-up. And again, each candidate will be given a 30-second warning by 1 gavel and a finish warning at 2 gavels. And yes.
The 2 people on the side, Margaret and Joe, make sure you share in with that microphone because it's...
Sure.
Yes, if you could speak directly into the microphone. I think there's some chairs over here if people need to sit down. Okay, so we'll begin this evening with Margaret Larson, our first candidate for school committee, with a 3-minute introduction.
All right. How am I on volume? Am I okay? All right. Thank you to the organizers for getting this set up for us tonight. My name is Margaret Larson. I'm pleased to be here tonight with my husband Greg and my son Eric. He's a 7th grader at Hampshire Regional. 9 years ago, we chose to move here to Southampton in great part because of the schools and because of the community's commitment to those schools and the value that the community places. I grew up in a small town very similar to Southampton. My father was a superintendent and my mother was an elementary school teacher. And they instilled in me from a very young age the idea that if you want to have a voice, you need to be involved. And in fact, my very first school committee meeting, I was in 5th grade, and I was with my classmates trying to make sure that our annual field trip did not get cut from the budget, and we succeeded. So in order to be involved in Southampton, I started by editing and publishing Tiger Talk, which is the newsletter at Norris. I also volunteered in the library there weekly. Then I kind of moved on to co-chairing the 6th grade committee. And for the last 2 years, I've been sitting on the school council at Hampshire Regional. I also decided to get more involved in the operations of the town, so I joined the Cultural Council, of which I'm now the chair. And this past budget cycle, I was the clerk for the newly revised, or I should say regenerated, Capital Improvement Committee. Now, my 6 years on the Cultural Council is coming to an end, but if I am elected to school committee, I would still want to be involved in the Capital Improvement Committee and the school council, because I think that would inform me more appropriately for the budgetary issues and the community needs. I'm running for school committee because I care very deeply about our children and about the schools that prepare them to be adults, and I'm particularly interested in the budget process, and I would happily volunteer to be on the finance subcommittee. And I know that's not everyone's first choice, but that's something I happen to enjoy. I think I bring a unique viewpoint to the school committee. I worked for many years as a marketing manager in a Fortune 100 company. I was a high school English teacher on both coasts, and I now own a small cabinet making school with my husband in Easthampton. So I understand the demands of teachers, I understand the needs that college-ready students have, and I understand the needs that students have that are going into a career. So I think that a school committee needs a range of voices with a range of experiences and a range of interests, and I hope to be one of those voices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. We'll now move to Joseph Moynihan on your 3-minute introduction.
My name's Joe Moynihan. I live on Cold Spring Road. My wife and I have lived in town for nearly 40 years. We had 3 children that went through the regional school district, graduated from Hampshire Regional, and went on to graduate from 4-year colleges. And I attribute that to the outstanding education that they received here in town. Presently, we have 4 grandchildren who attend the local schools. 2 of them are choice students who come in from South Hadley. Therefore, we have a continuing interest in the progress of the local school system. We were asked to talk about our qualifications. I've already spent 3 terms on the Hampshire Regional School Committee. Early on, my first term, I was a member of the Curriculum Subcommittee. More recently, I've attended Finance Committee meetings, although I've not formally joined the Finance Committee. All during those 9 years, I attended the vast majority of the monthly meetings. In addition, what other qualifications do I have? I've spent 37 years in teaching. I started at Chicopee in a self-contained, heterogeneously grouped situation. From there, I moved on to Bloomfield, Connecticut, and taught United States history for 5 years in a homogeneously grouped setting. I came back to West Springfield because the ride down 91 was too much for me. And most of the time that I was in West Springfield, I was a guidance counselor. In my time in guidance, most of our time was spent scheduling students and getting involved with any problems that students might have during the course of the day. We also did a lot of work with assessment testing and making groups. Okay.
Was that one? That was 30 seconds. Sorry.
What is my vision? Another question that was asked of us. My vision is that every student that attends Hampshire Regional should develop to their maximum abilities both socially and mentally. I believe that this should be done in a safe and secure school environment. And hopefully the end result is that we have students that can go on.
Thank you very much. We'll move to our final candidate for school committee, Tammy Walunas, for her 3-minute opening statement.
Hi, my name is Tammy Walunas. I'm 298 College Highway. I did not have the same questions that these guys had, so my introduction is going to be much more brief. I grew up in Westhampton. I attended Hampshire Regional and graduated from there. I then went on to Holyoke Community College, graduated there, then proceeded on to Westfield State College. My major was computer technology, or computers, basically. And I went on to work at Travelers Insurance Company, moved around. My last job was with GE Financials as a project manager, where I left to be a stay-at-home mom to take care of my 3 kids. I'm a current resident and taxpayer in Southampton for the last 23 years. I have 3 kids. 2 are up at Hampshire Regional now, and 1 is at North School. I'm very active in the community with Friends of the Southampton Greenway, the Southampton Youth Athletic Association. Been doing the secretarial work and the sponsorship director for that. And I previously did a lot of activities at the Norris PTO. I also go in and teach quilting, hand sewing to the Norris School kids for 3 weeks every year. I really would like to be on the committee so that we can have a voice and know what's going on up at the school. I've been attending different meetings to hear what's been going on, and I really think we need a liaison between the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and the school committees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have your written questions on your index card, or if you could raise them up and our volunteers will collect them.
I didn't know, I didn't have anything about my qualifications or any of that. No. I had an email.
Okay, so we'll begin with the questions prepared, given to each before this evening's forum. We'll start with Margaret. Hampshire Regional's financial growth has exceeded Southampton's Prop 2.5 limit and ability to pay. It has also negatively impacted the Norris school budget. What would you do to protect Southampton taxpayers while supporting students' educational needs?
Well, it's a balancing act. So on the one hand, you have schools making very difficult choices and homeowners making difficult choices when their taxes increase. This is a balancing act that's becoming even more challenging because of new graduation requirements that are imposed by the state, technology investments that are needed, class sizes that are becoming unwieldy without adding new teachers, and transportation costs increasing, but the promised state reimbursement for that often doesn't come as promised. One conversation that I've had with Principal Smitty as part of the school council is about planning for future expenses. Like the new track seemed to be a surprise. And I know that probably in another decade or so, the school is going to need a roof. And I'd like to see us planning in advance for those expenses that we know are coming down the road. There will always be expenses that come up that are a true surprise, but some of these very large expenses are not a surprise. I also think it's important for the community to understand why these costs are increasing at both schools and how the taxpayer money is being spent. I know I was surprised by the tuition and the transportation costs associated with sending our students to Smith Folk. It's enormous, and that's not a cost that we can control. It's something that we have to do to meet the needs of our students. I know that one of the issues with the last override request was the concern that not all of that $1 million was fully accounted for, and indeed that was the case. So conversations with taxpayers need to happen early, they need to happen often, and there needs to be more transparency in the process so that there's more agreement on both sides, and that both sides are open to coming to an agreement that works.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Joseph. Hampshire Regional's financial growth has exceeded Southampton's Prop 2.5 limit and ability to pay. It has also negatively impacted the Norris school budget. What would you do to protect Southampton taxpayers while supporting students' educational needs?
Well, basically, I saw this question as a question that relates to taxation. And I asked myself, are we willing to pay taxes for schools, for roads, for fire and police protection? Let me start by saying that, in my opinion, the Hampshire Regional School District has created a fair budget without frills and with a concern for taxpayers. Nobody likes paying taxes, and believe me, that includes me. Senior citizens, in particular, on fixed incomes in retirement, are placed in a difficult position to meet their tax obligations. What can be done? The only basic thing that I can see that we can do is to petition the state through our state representatives for additional funds for education. When small towns were asked to regionalize by the state several years ago, the state said that they would pay 100% of all transportation costs. Each year, transportational costs go up, and the state reduces the amount of money that they're sending to the local schools. Transportational costs are a huge burden to any regional school district. In conclusion, we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to come forth with the tax dollars to pay for our public schools?
Thank you very much. And Tammy Walunas, Hampshire Regional's financial growth has exceeded Southampton's Prop 2.5 limit and the ability to pay. It has also negatively impacted the Norris school budget. What would you do to protect Southampton taxpayers while supporting students' educational needs?
I agree wholeheartedly with what Margaret and Joe have said. We really do need to work at getting the best education that we can for our children and for the value that the people can afford in this town. There are many things to be looked at when sitting in the Board of Selectmen's meeting and one of the finance meetings and having them say that this year's budget has been dropped back to what it was 3 years ago. And how did we make that? We did. We were able to make it. We just had to learn how to spend the money correctly on what we need and make sure that the taxpayers are getting the value and the children are getting the education.
Thanks very much. Our second question will start with Joseph. What are some things that Hampshire Regional can do to attract more homeschooled, charter, and private students back to HRHS?
As a school system, Southampton, in my opinion, is doing an excellent job at keeping our students in our local regional school district. However, there is one problem, and that is the town of Williamsburg. Williamsburg has 101 students that are eligible to attend Hampshire Regional High School. 37 of those students opt out to attend charter and choice schools. The Hampshire Regional School Committee, along with the administration at the high school, had a questionnaire several years ago that they sent to Williamsburg parents asking why so many people are going to choice and charter schools. Some of the responses were that they were concerned about curriculum. Class size and transportation were other issues. In contrast, Southampton has 433 students eligible for the Hampshire Regional High School. only 24 opt out for choice and charter schools. That's only about 6% of the total school population, and I think that's a very favorable number. Easthampton would be happy to have such numbers. Our big problem is Williamsburg, where 37% of the students choose not to attend Hampshire Regional High School.
Thank you very much. We'll move now to Tammy on the same question. What are some things that Hampshire Regional can do to attract more homeschooled, charter, and private students back to HRHS?
The one thing that I've noticed is that we need to emphasize more on the great extracurricular activities that the school offers to the kids. And these are the ones that are other than sports. There's dramas, there's plays, there's the robotics teams, there's yearbook, FBLA, music, chorus, band, as school match wits, and student council. All of these are not promoted. You never see things of these, of this information in the papers. You never hear it being spoke about around town. And these are big things that are going on in that school. And if kids knew that they had other options of just doing the regular math and science and social studies, they would be able to express themselves and value Hampshire Regional as an option of going there to learn more.
Thank you very much. And to Margaret, what are some things that Hampshire Regional can do to attract more homeschooled, charter, and private students back to HRHS?
So in my introductory comments, I referenced the fact that I was a marketing manager and said that that would bring a different viewpoint to the school committee. So on the school council, with that background, we developed a survey that went to fifth and sixth grade parents throughout the region, to all 5 schools, in order to gauge their perceptions. What did people know and not know about Hampshire Regional? And what we found is there's just so much people don't know. They don't know about the activities that Tammy referenced. They don't know that we're an AP honor roll school. And there are perceptions that maybe the curriculum isn't up to date. So using that information, I think that gives us a base from which to move forward, to develop an outreach program. We've already done a brochure that I helped edit that mentions more of these things. It's not as sports focused. It's more the opportunities for both middle and high school students at the school. And we're looking at doing more with a newsletter and being in better contact with the newspapers so that they're publicizing more of what we're doing. And targeting as much as we can, as Joe said, to Williamsburg, because we know that that is one of the issues, and we want to show them that we can offer just as much and possibly more to students than Northampton High, which serves as our major competition for the Williamsburg students.
Thank you very much. And our last prepared question will start with Tammy. Do you think it is important to present the proposed school budget at a public hearing prior to voting approval by the school committee? Why or why not?
Yes, I do believe that we should have a public meeting, a public hearing on the budget for the school. The citizens of Southampton need to be aware of what is happening up at Hampshire, and the budget is a great way to show that. They can see where dollars are being spent, going to, and how much it costs to actually get the job done up there correctly, and really what all the breakdowns are that is needed to get that school to run properly.
Great, thank you. We'll move to Margaret. Do you think it is important to present the proposed school budget at a public hearing prior to voting approval by the school committee, and why or why not?
The short answer is yes, and the long answer is yes. But One of the things that, like I said, that I found interesting is various costs associated with running a regional school. Now, I came from school districts that were not regional school districts. I lived in towns where we did not participate in a regional school district. And we have many new parents moving to this district and don't know what it takes to run a regional school. So I think having that opportunity to present a budget for these people, for them to ask questions, for them to understand the dynamics of a regional school and what that means and how that differs, I think that that would go a long way to helping people understand why the choices are made, and if things need to change, if taxes need to increase, why that might be the case, and where exactly that money is going to.
Great, thank you very much. And that concludes our prepared questions, and now we have 3 questions from the audience.
You didn't get a chance to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe I shouldn't answer.
Don't fire me.
Might be a good sign.
No. Don't fire me. So, I'm sorry, Joe. Do you think it is important to present the proposed school budget at a public hearing prior to voting approval by the school committee? And why or why not?
I thought this was the most difficult of the questions. It caused me to think the most. I don't see any one answer to this particular question. It would be nice to have the support of the town when voting on a school budget. And I believe that Hampshire Regional School Committee members should endorse the feelings of the community. This question caused me to ask myself many questions. Among them, 1, how could a large group of people discuss a line-by-line budget in a public forum? It takes the Hampshire Regional School Committee with 18 members numerous meetings to arrive at a workable budget. Secondly, how much time would be involved for the superintendent, principal, and business manager? These are the people who are most knowledgeable relative to the budget. Also, would the other 4 towns in the school union be required to have such a public meeting on their budget? Lastly, what would be the responsibilities of the Hampshire Regional School Committee members to such a forum? If the results were negative, would they be responsible to vote down the budget? Such a new approach as a public hearing on public school budget should be given considerable thought because of all the many ramifications.
Thank you very much. I apologize for forgetting. I was too excited when I got the orange card. So the orange cards now are questions that the audience has given, and we'll start with Margaret on the first question. What do you think about high-stakes testing, and should they be de-emphasized?
I am very concerned about high-stakes testing, and particularly the PARCC test and some of the new requirements that are being asked, particularly as they pertain to students' focus on preparing for tests rather than being prepared as a whole student. With the new test, the amount of time needed for the test, so 3 full days, 3 times a year, 9 days devoted to testing out of our 180 days. And what that does to a student's enjoyment being in school, if it's all about the test and not about the learning. So I do absolutely think that that should be de-emphasized. As a member of the school council, we just signed on to a resolution that asked that exactly for that thing, that we delay our acceptance of the new test, and that possibly MCAS be de-emphasized as well as a graduation requirement. I do have concerns about that because I do feel like there needs to be some level of standardization with what our students in the state are learning, but I think the emphasis has just gotten to the point where that's all we're talking about in our school council, and that's all the parents are talking about as well.
Thank you very much. The same question to Joe. What do you think about high-stakes testing, and should they be de-emphasized?
First of all, we need standardized testing. We have to group kids for special math classes, for foreign language. So testing is needed. What I dislike is that the state is taking the information from the MCAS test and they're using it against towns and cities. In order to graduate from a public high school in Massachusetts today, you have to pass the MCAS test. And there are certain students that will never pass any standardized test, students that are in special education. They just don't have the readiness to handle the test. So I think it's wrong also that the state takes this information and pits one city against another with the results. I mean, Holyoke's on the verge of losing control of their schools. Lawrence has already lost control of their schools. In summary, I would like to see better local control and go back to the old achievement test system where you utilize the ability of your test results within the system and the state played no part in it.
Thank you very much. And to Tammy, what do you think about high-stakes testing, and should they be de-emphasized?
I agree with what Margaret said. From seeing things that are going on in the schools today, that a lot of it is emphasized on just prepping these kids for what they're going to be tested and not learning the whole overall of what they need to learn in school. It's more of they need to be taught how to do math one way where we all learned another way, and you try to help your kids and you're having teachers tell you, no, you don't help your kids because you're teaching them the wrong way. And it just does not make sense. So yeah, I think there's been too much emphasis on it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tammy. This next question, we'll start with Joe. The school budgets consume 2/3 of the town income. Do you support meeting with a 5-town finance committee as a group to pare down HRH's expenses?
Personally, I don't see how we can cut down on expenses. We're at a raw bones budget as it is. Next year, when the State Accreditation Board comes in to take a look at Hampshire Regional, we don't have, by state standards, enough PE teachers. Personally, my feeling is I'm not sure that I agree with meeting with town officials. I think basically every town faces the same problem. And that comes down to the question of taxation and whether we're willing to pay for our schools, roads, fire department, etc.
Thank you very much. Next to Tammy, the school budgets consume 2/3 of the town income. Do you support meeting with 5 town finance committees as a group to pare down HRH's expenses?
I believe that's going to be very hard to do, meeting up with the 5 towns. As it is, we see that Southampton is underrepresented, where there's voting going on up at the school committees and with different budgets. And I believe that we need to have more questions being asked to get that information to get our budget up to grade for that. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
And for Margaret, the school committee budgets consume 2/3 of the town income. Do you support meeting with a 5-town finance committee as a group to pare down HRH's expenses?
Well, I don't think I'm opposed in general to the idea of meeting with five-town finance committees. I think where I take a little bit of issue is the assumption that that meeting would be to pare down expenses, because I agree with Joe that after looking over the budget, I believe that Hampshire Regional is indeed at bare bones, and with some of the new requirements that have come into play, and parents' desires to have smaller class sizes, we're not going to be able to meet those requirements and meet parents' demands and pare the budget at the same time. Those three things are not possible.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question submitted by the audience, and we'll start with Tammy. What is the single biggest challenge facing HRHS over the next 5 years?
I believe that would be reducing their budget, but also finding ways to incorporate and utilize facilities or land that they have. One of the projects that came in was the solar. They have many acres of land that they could very easily do that and help reduce their electrical. So there are some things that, yes, that could be looked at. It's just a matter of going in and looking at where things are in there.
Great, thank you. And to Margaret, what is the single biggest challenge facing HRHS over the next 5 years?
I think the biggest challenge is continuing to meet the needs of an increasingly global economy and preparing our students for that economy. And that involves the language and foreign language instruction that we're being asked to provide by the state, and making sure that we're reducing class sizes there. That involves adding the AP classes and differentiation of instruction that our students need, and doing that while not breaking the budget.
Great, thank you. And to Joe, what is the single biggest challenge facing HRHS over the next 5 years?
I'm going to head off in a little different direction.
Could you just move the microphone?
Oh,
I
sure.
was hogging, sorry.
I'm going to head off in a little different direction. I think the biggest issue for all schools today is keeping their students and not allowing your students to go out for choice. We're fighting over students. That's where the money comes from. $5,000 per student, per choice student. I like what the superintendent did. He encouraged Worthington to come into our school district. We could potentially pick up, I think it's 36 kids from Worthington. Well, multiply that, I think he's asking that they pay $7,500 for their choice entrance to Hampshire Regional. That's a lot of money, and that's a big issue. There are other options out there for us, too. The Cummington Elementary School is literally closed down. Central Berkshire Region is now saying that Cummington students have to go off to Dalton to go to elementary school. Well, Goshen's not that far away. Worthington is close. Williamsburg is just down the road. There's another opportunity for us to get into the game of acquiring additional students, which we need.
Thank you very much. That concludes the questioning part of this evening's session for the school committee members. We will now have their 1-minute closing statements, and if you'll allow me as moderator, I'd like to extend to Tammy an extra minute at the end if you wanted to add some time to either qualifications that you didn't have at the beginning, that the other candidates did have, so that you would have 2 minutes and the other candidates would have 1, as fairness as we did at the beginning.
Thank you.
So we'll start with Margaret with your closing statement.
Joining the school committee has been something I've wanted to do since we moved to town. And I waited until I felt that I had the knowledge of the school system and the time to commit to this. One of my enduring disappointments when I attend the current school committee meetings is watching the superintendent wait for people to come and looking at his watch and hoping that he gets a quorum. So I would commit to being at those meetings, and I would commit to doing this for the period of time after my son has graduated as well, because I think we need all kinds of voices represented on the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And to Joseph.
Well, I retired about 15 years ago, did a little traveling and did a little hiking. In retirement, I asked myself, what can I do for the town? We lived here for 40 years. The only thing I knew anything about was education. So I volunteered to serve on the regional school committee. Every 3 years since, I've continued to volunteer. I don't know that I'm any better candidate than the other two. I think you've got 3 good candidates. It's up to you to make a choice.
Thank you very much, Joe. And finally to Tammy, and just a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I really can't add any more qualifications. Being a stay-at-home mom, that's a lot of work. But I do have the time that I can invest in it. I do want to say the one thing that hit me with being at North School and going through 4 principals through that time, former principal Dr. Collins had told us when he left that the parents needed to be more involved with this town and school decisions. And that's what I would like to do. I like attending the meetings. I like asking questions. I like challenging authority. I would love to be in this position. I agree. There's much more, what's the word I want? They're very qualified, the people that I'm running against. But again, I have the time that I'd like to commit towards this. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the candidates for school committee for your answers this evening and your participation. And we'll move to the... We'll move to the select board portion.
No. Hey. I'm Ray. Hi, Dave. Nice to meet you, sir. Nice to meet you.
So we'll start with Charlie and then go to Dave.
Sure. I was told to wear gray pants. He wore the gray shirt. I'm not sure.
That's a great shirt. Okay, so we will now start the final portion of the forum this evening with the select board. We have 3 candidates for select board, but unfortunately Shannon Cutler is ill this evening and is unable to join us. We do have with us tonight Charlie Kinecki and David McDougall, who are here. Again, we will have a 3-minute introduction, and then we will have, during that time, if anyone would like to write a question on an index card, if you could raise your hand, volunteers will pass those cards out. We can collect those after the opening statements. And then each of the candidates have received the 3 questions prior to this evening's forum, and then we will get the audience questions after that. So we'll start with Charlie to my right with the opening, for your first opening statement.
Were there any address towards the meeting first? We only have 3 questions to ask, so we have this.
Point of order, favoritism in the audience. 2 cards.
There's 2 of you. 1 each.
Touche.
Okay.
Okay. My family moved into this town in the 1930s. Obviously, I was born here, raised here. I went to school here, went to school at the Norris School, and way back when, the school for high school was in Easthampton, so they bused us to Easthampton. I've been actively involved in this town since day one. I've been on the Board of Health. I used to be a fireman EMT for several years. I was the animal inspector for a great number of years. I've moved through all different types of committees and boards and stuff. I've done everything from ambulance billing to looking at zoning regulations for horses. I have been on the Labrie field to take and get that designed and up and going on Strong Road. And for the last 4 years, I've been working on the public safety complex issue. That complex is becoming one of the major projects of the town for the next couple of years. I have a vested interest in the town. I operate Twin Orchard Farm with my son on Valley Road. So we certainly rely on the town's services, and we've always tried to give back to the town. So I'm here now to basically look to be on the select board to help if I can give back even more.
Wonderful, thank you. And David?
Well, I didn't move here in the 1930s, but,
I didn't say I did.
sorry, Charlie. My wife and I did relocate here from Westhampton in 2000. We found this farmhouse on Russellville Road, built in 1844, where rehab became a way of life. And at some point, I wanted to be involved in my community. As a young man, I worked in a mailroom and as a computer operator before I ended up going to college. And at that time, I was on a ski patrol as a advanced first aid and then finally as an EMT. And then what I found was that I started developing a balance in my life where I had my family, my career, and my community. And so back in 2004, I found a tree that was going to fall down and take out 3 roads of telephone lines. And I approached the retired highway super, Ed Cawley, and he said, get involved. And at that time, there was a 6-month stint that was open for the Board of Selectmen. I guess I ran against the late Rio Labrie, and I was elected. And I said, I'll try this some more. And then I was re-elected, and at that time made chairman of the Select Board with 6 months' experience. Being a selectman is a learning experience every single day. You're pushed to try to understand complex issues facing the town with the mind of focusing on what's happening in front of you today and what's going to happen in the future, and trying to find the balancing between today's needs and future's needs. I graduated from UC San Diego. I still don't know how I got into the school. I was 25 at the time, and then somehow I got into med school and then ended back in Western Mass. Currently, I'm a president of a small company of 4 doctors and 15 mid-levels, and we have some growing pains and dealing with complex issues of budget formation and contracts for managed care with different hospitals and care settings is something that I have to deal with on a daily basis. And so when I pull all of those experiences together, they come to this table. And it could be anything from, I didn't do anything with horses, but as a selectman, I have gone pick up a dog. So if someone had to go pick up, and I didn't have someone to pick the dog up, so I had to pick the dog up. But those are the type of experiences that you need when you sit at this table, is that you need a breadth of experience. What's really going on here is that you're dealing with people. It doesn't matter what your college degree is, it's how you deal with the people. And your experience with dealing with people comes here to this table.
Thank you very much. So now we'll move to the prepared questions that were given to each candidate before this evening. And we'll start with Charlie. The select, oh, I'm sorry. Collect the cards. Thank you. So Charlie, the Select Board meets every other Tuesday. Are you available to fulfill the commitments of the Select Board, including attending multiple committee, commissions, and board meetings each week?
When I saw this question, all I could do was smile. Tonight I'm here, tomorrow night I'm meeting with the Finance Committee. Wednesday night we have the public forum at the fire station. I've been sitting on the Public Safety Committee for the last 4 years, sometimes meeting twice, sometimes twice a week. I'm fully aware of the meetings that are required, and I'm fully aware of the fact that unless I get sick, I don't see any reason why I won't be attending as many meetings as I can.
Thank you very much. And to David, the Select Board meets every other Tuesday. Are you available to fulfill the commitments of the Select Board, including attending multiple committee, commissions, and board meetings each week?
That is one aspect of being a selectman, and sometimes we actually meet twice a week as a select board. One of the things that I found that's important to do is that you have to allow the committees and boards that are in town to have their own say, and to develop their own sort of environment that they work within. There have been times in the past 10 years where it was thought that the select board should show up because a certain person was going to behave a certain way on a board or commission. So I've had that experience. Going to every single, Conservation Commission and doing all that, I think gets in the way of all the other volunteers in town. I think important issues should be, we should be made notice of as a selectman. But actually attending all additional meetings, I don't think that's actually part of the job. I think that just interferes with other people doing their job.
Okay, thank you. The second question will start with you, David. The priorities, what are the top issues that you see currently in Southampton, and which one do you think the town should address first, and how do you vision the Southampton of the future?
Good question. The basic thing comes down to this, as a group of people living in a geographical area, we sort of form together a town for the sole purpose of helping each other. And we have to fund how we do that. And right now, the costs to do that are outpacing the ability for us to support that just based on, taxes on our homes. And I think we're going to see that sort of gap widen as we move forward. We did get a breather on energy costs when gasoline prices came down, but that's coming back up. And so today the problem is how you finance being a town. Tomorrow is the same difficulty. And I thought when we tried to do the Prop 2.5, which is part of the law, and it's there for small towns like this, to fix that gap. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but I think going back to that is probably the only way we're going to fix what's going on in this town and what the major problem is. We can't cut services any further. And at some point, if you have to say to yourself, where do you see the future for the town? Closing the fire department, closing the ambulance service, having the state police cover the town. It's not the future I see for this town. And I think we have to sort of look to ourselves to see how we can fix the finances for a town to get to where we want to be, where we don't have to make those choices.
Thank you very much. And to Charlie, the priorities, what are the top issues that you see currently in Southampton, and which one do you think the town should address first, and how do you vision the Southampton of the future?
Well, to build from David, I agree with David as to where his position is. We need to set priorities. I mean, one of the priorities, only from a purely prejudice point of view, is the public safety operation. We need to start focusing on that because it's at the front of the table right now. We also need to start looking at how we're going to manage our finances and stuff, and I think we need to keep the door open on regionalization of certain services. We need to keep an idea that it might be that we need to link to other communities for some of the services. I'm not saying the major services, but some of the stuff that goes on. That's a possibility. The other part to this is we need to take and work better as a community. I'm watching, and I shouldn't say it this way, but I can't think of another way of phrasing it, the fractured activities that go on between certain parts of the community's goals to try to get something accomplished, and trying to make sure that everybody is heard at the table and we resolve issues, not just by inaction, let them fester. But I see this town evolving into a bedroom community, and I probably can see it with pretty clear eyes because I was here when I used to inspect 26 dairy farms. How many dairy farms do you see now?
Is there 4? Charlie, is there 4 now, or is it?
I don't know if there's 3,
Okay.
but that's the point. It's changing into a bedroom community.
Okay, thank you very much. And the final prepared question, we'll start with Charlie. Do you believe Select Board members are sufficiently prepared to discuss complex issues prior to the meeting? If not, what would you do as a member of the Select Board to make certain you have a comprehensive understanding of issues before you vote?
Because I'm not sitting on the Board of Selectmen, I can only grasp the information they obtain by sitting in the audience, which is not a fair judgment area to be in to make any kind of a conclusion. My understanding is that the town administrator provides them with information through a Dropbox system so that the information is available. But I also realize that there are special interest groups that bend the ear of the select person before the select meetings on different topics, which raise questions at the time before preparedness is done. If I was going to approach it, I would probably look at the fact that if you see questions that need to be addressed, you table the issue and move it on to the next meeting, rather than trying to make a decision based on part information.
Thank you. And to David, do you believe Select Board members are sufficiently prepared to discuss complex issues prior to the meetings? If not, what would you do as a member of the Select Board to make certain you have a comprehensive understanding of issues before you vote?
Well, that's a good question. My experience goes back before we had a town administrator, and as chair at that time, the only way to really know what was going on in town is I would have to talk to the police chief, I'd have to talk to the highway super, I'd have to talk to the fire chief, talk to the town clerk, and that's how I sort of stayed connected with issues within the town. Once we had a town administrator in place, that was great. There was an organization now, there was more a business-like atmosphere in the Board of Selectmen office. But then I started seeing that there was a little bit of a disconnect from those department heads. You may not have gone out, just taken the word from the town administrator of what the issue was. But my experience is that when we get a complex issue in front of us, and we usually get the agenda prior, and if there's something on the agenda, we raise a question. Before meetings, I try to meet with the town administrator, ask her what's going on, what are the key things I need to know this evening. I'll try to talk to Liz if I catch it for the meetings. I want to know what the chairperson and the town administrator have on the budget and what the information they have. If at some point in a meeting, we get to a point where there are more questions there than we have answers, we table the issue. There's no reason to rush through it. You can wait, put it on the next agenda until you have additional information.
Great, thank you. Now we'll move to the audience questions. Okay, we have 4 questions. We'll start with David. Do Do you feel Southampton's town departments have too many employees?
No.
Okay. Any other? Okay. That was easy. And the same to you, Charlie. Do you feel Southampton's town departments have too many employees?
No.
That was easy. Okay, I'll start now. We'll go to Charlie again. What efforts will you make toward getting a sewer system developed for the town?
What efforts will I make? As one member of the Board of Selectmen, I think the sewer system, first of all, should be spearheaded by the Board of Health, because they're the agency that oversees that type of operation. They, in turn, should forward what they have to the Board of Selectmen to see moving it. I was involved with this way back when we hired SEA, and we spent, what, $500,000 in studies and everything else to do that? 350? Gary's here to just correct.
I've been told it was $500,000.
Gary's here to correct me. And, but the point is we've run through this before, but all that data is old now. And what needs to happen is the Board of Health has to determine sites through their health agent as to where the priorities are in the community relative to sewage disposal and water contamination. That's the board that should be bringing it to the Board of Selectmen to move forward on it.
Thank you. And David, what efforts will you make toward getting a sewer system developed for the town?
Well, this is the question that sort of is the definition of the town. There are areas in the town, I think the study that Gary and Charlie were talking about around the ponds, and there were some issues there. And when Easthampton was laying in pipe to go out to the Plains area, because they still have capacity, Westfield doesn't have capacity now. So Easthampton wastewater treatment has excess capacity to handle some of the town. But the true question is that if you just isolate take away the areas that have this inappropriate soils, like in around the pond, and they have issues. So if you bring in sewage to the town, what does that do for your town? Well, it opens up areas of the town that may not have been developed before because of soil conditions. And what does that do? That brings in more housing. What does that do? That taxes the schools. So when you look at these issues of just doing one thing, the whole piece of Southampton is affected by that one thing. Now, we do have sewer that's down there, Big Y. I think it goes as far as, I think the car wash. I think the car wash is the last thing that's tied into it.
Car wash is the last one, because then it'd have to be a lift station again.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be a reason to sort of, punch it down Route 10. But when you start bringing that kind of progress into the town, then you're really bringing development to town. And, having grown up in the Lowell area and watching small towns during the early 80s be overdeveloped, they're just swamped. They're totally swamped. One little stop sign becomes a huge traffic burden. Now traffic backs all the way up. So sewage would be right in certain areas, but for the whole town, I think you're opening up, a whole can of worms of other issues that would affect the town.
Okay, thank you. Well, this one's also, we'll start with David. Would you be in favor of upgrading the town administrator position by giving it the power to hire and fire town employees?
So you're talking about a town manager position. I can't, I'm not really good with Mass General laws, but there's a gradual progression for the town. And, going from, town administrator to town manager with a Board of Selectmen, and then, representational town meetings, and then I think the next step after that is a council system with a mayor. I'm thinking of it. I don't think the town needs to have a town manager at this time. I think we're just sort of grasping with the role of town administrator and how that fits. I've seen how we hired Diane Schindler, and the finance board at the time just came in and dropped the budget on her desk. She was sort of, a little bit in over her head, and it was this sort of giving up of the responsibility of the finance committee at that time. Now we've seen a more of a balanced approach with Heather working with finance that really has sort of gelled a lot of things that we've been looking for, what the town administrator would bring to the picture. But I think, for the town, I think another 5 years of getting used to the town administrator and dealing with finance, and then sort of developing, maybe at that time, a town manager where everything is sort of now moving in that one direction.
Thank you. And to Charlie, would you be in favor of upgrading the town administrator position by giving it the power to hire and fire town employees?
David is absolutely correct in the fact that the way the town's evolving, eventually it's going to reach that point. I don't know if 5 years is the number, 3 years is the number, or 6 years is the number, but the reality is it is going to happen eventually. When you see towns of, we'll say 8,000, you're into that happening at that point in time. It really comes down to how comfortable the select board are and the residents, but it's a natural course of events. This town is going through growing pains, is what it's going through.
Okay, thank you. We'll start again with you, Charlie. Do you endorse public participation in the development of the annual $15 million budget? How would you accomplish this?
I think that we need to start looking at some more open forums to let people come in, hear what's going on at the finance level, hear what's going on at the selectmen's level. One of the biggest tools we have right here is the cable access channel. The cable access channel was enhanced when we moved the screens around and stuff, so people can take and see what's being presented better. We still need to have better regulating on people getting to microphones so that they can be heard at home. I don't think that we need these forums where everybody has to gather in a room and listen to this, but the cable access channels should be focused on more to educate. And I think we hit an interesting nerve when we did the PowerPoint presentations on the public safety complex and put it on the website, because we had, I don't know, how many hits on that, Art? Yeah, and it was like people were really paying attention to that. So that might be a media that we start to look at even more down the road.
Thank you. And to David, do you endorse public participation in the development of the annual $15 million budget? And how would you accomplish this?
Well, I think we already sort of have that. We have, at any of the meetings that I'm aware of, especially our meetings, we always have open time for the public for comment on issues before the board, including the budget. But you got to remember, we only sort of assemble a budget. I shouldn't say we, it's mostly the finance with guidance with the political oversight from the Board of Selectmen and working with the town administrator. The actual vote on the budget is at the annual town meeting. And, if there is a motion from the floor to delete a line item or to change the budget, the public can do that in that forum. We are televised. We're always here if somebody wants to come down and have a comment. But I'll have to go back to Joe Monahan's comment. I don't think you could have a constructive meeting if you were to bring in, 3,000 voters and say, hey, let's do the budget together. You just can't do it in that size. You need to have a committee put together the budget, but you can take in comment at that time. Actually, putting the budget together with everybody would be chaos.
Thank you. And we have one last question from the audience. We'll start with David. What do you feel is the biggest obstacle to the Board of Selectmen in regards to effectively managing and running the town?
The biggest obstacle. A lot of what we do at this board, at the table, has nothing to do with running the town, to be honest with you. Running the town is the highway super. Running the town is the town clerk. Running the town is the Board of Assessors. It's Heather, it's Vicky. They run the town. All of that is sort of built into the system, and when you ask if we have too many town employees, we just have barely enough, if not enough. So the running of the town occurs because of the department heads we have in place. Chief Silvernail, Chief Workman. They're there, they're in place. They run the town. This board here, we're the political guidance. Where is our vision? Where do we see where we're going? We make the choices. No one gets a raise this year, or we cut back in this area. Those are the political decisions we make. And I tell you right now, since the recession of '08, the decisions on this board have nothing but to undermine the operation of the town, because every year, the budget has been cut and cut and cut, or level funded. Well, level fund is a cut. And so the inner workings of the town exist despite what we do at this table, despite the fact that we keep cutting budgets.
Thank you. And to Charlie, what do you feel is the biggest obstacle to the Board of Selectmen in regards to effectively managing and running the town?
Obviously, I've not sat on the Board of Selectmen, so I don't know the inner workings of what goes on. I would say that probably working more as a team, trying to bring things together, but I don't view this current Board of Selectmen as not working as a team. Don't misunderstand the way I'm saying that. I just think that we need to better work as a group, but I'm not seeing anything that's really stopping the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move to our closing statements. You each have a minute, and we'll start with Charlie.
Oh, you'll love this. Back in 1990-something or other, I ran for the Board of Selectmen. I lost by 2 votes?
I thought it was a landslide against you.
Yeah. I have Gary here, so I'm all set. But it was 1 or 2 votes. Well, Providence evidently interceded because then my career took off. I became the State District Health Officer. I oversee over 100 cities and towns in western Massachusetts. I provide them assistance, so on and so forth. Well, now it appears that I might be getting into the retirement system. So, what better time to run for a select board and try to get back those 2 votes?
Thank you very much, and to David.
Well, it's been a great 10 years, and like I said earlier, I'm just beginning to understand this job and what it means. What I do enjoy now being on the select board is not only all the friends I've made in town, but is to mentor some of the newer select people as they come up, and watching them rise and find their own voice and find their own place on the board, as Liz has. I think it's quite rewarding to me. In working with the board on major complex issues, it's satisfying to come to some development of things like this building. This building was vacant, and for the next 30 or 40 years, this is going to be the town hall, so it needs to be rehabbed, and that's going to outlive me. And so, in the development of rehabbing this building into the new town hall, I've done something that is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I look for other once-in-a-lifetime things to do.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the candidates for Select Board. And I'd like to thank you all for coming and participating tonight, and especially to Jeff, Charlie, Margaret, Joe, Tammy, Charlie, and David for your participation. We hope that you all are better informed as you go to vote. And we ask, drive safely and have a great evening. Thank you.